Hi everyone, my name is Tim Shu, and I'm a fourth-year computer science major at Georgia Tech. I'm fresh off an internship from Silicon Valley, come from a good socioeconomic background. I'm perfectly physically healthy, have a stable family life, and have strong and meaningful friendships. Yet, on August 25th, I was found on the floor, 30 minutes away from dying from overdosing on over 100 prescription painkillers from trying to kill myself. There was nothing wrong with my life on paper. If anything, I had everything to lose. I loved my family so much. I wanted to be able to make it to my brother's bachelor party, wedding, and to be an uncle. I love my friends so much. I wanted to be able to continue growing up with them, to see who they'd end up with, where they'd be, and see all the amazing things that they would accomplish. I wanted to see where I could go, and my dream of making a positive impact on the lives of others, even though at the time, I didn't know how. I was willing to forgo all that, to give up on everything I loved in the entire world, cared about, or dreamed of, because of something that many people don't believe exists: mental illness. If you break your arm, a doctor can use an X-ray to diagnose exactly where in your arm a fracture or break in your bone occurs, and issue a treatment plan with a cast or a splint to move everything back into place. However, there's no X-ray for mental illness. This can take weeks or months to see the full picture, as certain symptoms can overlap. Unfortunately for me, the Asian cultural mentality I was raised in was one in which mental health did not exist. I first realized that I wasn't just like everybody else in my freshman year of high school. I'd been an academically inclined, involved, and social student. When my first fall semester had went completely fine, that following spring, I was hit by my first ever bout of depression. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't eat. All I could do was want to lay in my room alone. It got so bad to the point that I couldn't even remember what clothes to put on. That depressive episode would be followed by an episode of mania, which is basically characterized by racing thoughts, fast speech, delusions, and inability to sleep. Like clockwork, my mood would cycle on a bi-weekly basis between depression and mania, much to the observation of my parents. While I was extremely good at hiding how unwell I was with my words to others, I was unable to hide how unwell I was with my actions. My band director, who had been teaching kids for over 30 years, noticed that something was erratic with the behavior. He said to my mother, "Miss Shu, while your child is extremely bright, there's definitely something wrong. You need to see a doctor. You need to see a doctor." Well, my mother smiled and said, "Yes, yes." In reality, I never received any help from my family. When I got so sad to the point that I couldn't get out of bed, my dad would just tell me to take a nap and then everything would get better. When I got so sad to the point that I couldn't eat, my mom would tell me to just cheer up and to not waste food. While they both loved and cared for me, the Asian cultural mindset that they were raised in was one in which mental health did not exist. As a result, though misguided, they handled my situation the only way they knew how. Like clockwork, my mood cycled on a bi-weekly basis between depression and mania, much to the observation of my parents. 3 months later, I was at my breaking point. After going for over 72 hours without sleeping, I broke down, crying hysterically in front of my teachers and classmates. My desperate cries for help in private had proved futile, so the only option I saw left was to rely on the sympathy of the public, and it worked. I was taken to a hospital, able to see a doctor, get medication, and finally put a name to the illness that had been destroying my life: bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder, or manic depressive illness, is a brain disorder characterized by rapid shifts in mood, or erratic shifts in mood, between periods of extremely down depressed, or negative behavior to periods of extremely up, ecstatic, elated, and elated behavior. Like clockwork, my mood would shift between depression and mania, and that was the textbook definition of bipolar disorder. Unfortunately, it's incurable and it's something that requires you to be on medication for the rest of your entire life in order to maintain a stable mood. I was prescribed lithium, a mood stabilizer for several mental illnesses. But in order for it to have a therapeutic effect, you have to build up to and eventually maintain a certain level in your bloodstream in order to maintain a stable mood. As a result, the longer and longer I was on my medication, the healthier and more successful I became. I was able to regain my academic performance, become more involved in school, and get my friends back. This toxic cultural Asian mentality caused me to be ashamed of my illness, to ignore it, and pretend that it didn't ever exist. As a result, the longer and longer I was on my medication, the more and more my parents encouraged me to lower my dose, even though that is the opposite of what you should do. Unbeknownst to us at the time, my dose had gotten so low to the point that it was effectively 0. Undetectable in my blood. The equivalent of going off medication completely. Only 7 years later that I learned that I had been essentially unmedicated since starting college. It was a miracle I even made it through college at all, successfully, from doing all of that. Unfortunately, my luck was about to run out. Last fall, in 2018, I had a busy semester with 14 hours of classes, hardship, and an intense job search. But despite all of that, I was able to succeed. That's why I thought that in that spring, with only 12 hours of classes and a job secured, that I would have a great time and it would be relaxing and fun. But instead of that fun semester it was supposed to be, completely the opposite. 2 months into that spring, I was hit by my first bout of depression after over 7 years of health. I was terrified. Fortunately enough, this time, learning from my past, I was determined to try as hard as I could to get better. And this time, my parents were willing to help. I got so sad at the point that I couldn't even open my eyes or think, but I was able to crawl myself into GT counseling and show them how much I needed help. They were able to get me an emergency referral to meet with Sam Psychiatry. Treating a mental illness is not nearly as straightforward as a physical ailment. As with each medication I tried, the more and more, the harder it became to go on. With each medication I tried, the depressions and withdrawals from switching were absolutely brutal. The only way I made it through that semester was by blaming it on the only thing that I could, my situation. As a student at Georgia Tech, I've noticed a common theme among people voicing how toxic and difficult of an environment that this school can be. As a result, I made myself believe that my depression was because of my situation, and that going to San Francisco for an internship that summer would solve all my problems. But again, I could not have been more wrong. Near the end of that spring, my school psychiatrist and therapist told my parents, "We don't feel comfortable letting Tim go across the country alone without any professional help. He's been way too unstable this semester." Unfortunately for me, history repeats itself. And just like how my parents refused to heed the warnings and advice of my band director 7 years prior, they refused to heed and ignored the advice of my doctors. "Tim, do you really need to see a doctor? You're going to be in your dream city, in California, making great money. Do you really need to see a doctor?" After all this time, they still believed that my mental illness was externally caused. I was in San Francisco, across the country, alone, without any professional help. This toxic Asian cultural mentality around delegitimizing psychologists caused my parents to believe that they could play doctor since they knew me better than them. that they could tell me what I needed to take. But if your medication is being changed on a monthly basis by your parents instead of a mental health professional, how can you even know for sure what's working or not? My withdrawals from stopping antidepressants that summer messed me up to the point that I couldn't even remember how to walk home from work without getting lost. It hurt my work performance too, as my depressive episodes would make it so hard to focus that I would literally have to go to break rooms just to hide and cry. That ruined my perfect summer in San Francisco that everybody thought I had from what I portrayed to others. People really only share what they want you to see. The only thing keeping me alive through that spring semester was the hope that if I changed my situation, everything would get better. But if I was severely depressed and suicidal in my dream city that summer, how was I supposed to make it through a fall semester at Georgia Tech? What was the point of even living anymore? That's what led me to my 10th that first week of school. Nobody that commits suicide really wants to die. They're just driven to a breaking point after an accumulation of unbearable suffering. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And with each depressive episode I had over and over again, I could not get better no matter how hard I tried. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, but without medication, my problem would have been permanent. It was the worst thing to happen to me, yet the best thing to happen to me. If I hadn't done what I did, I would be still suffering in silence right now. I would have never been able to receive the care, understanding, and acceptance I so craved, or have had the strength and the courage to share my story with you all today. I'm not trying to focus my blame on my parents, but more so on that Asian cultural mentality. While they both loved and cared for me, people are a byproduct of their upbringing. And by handling my situation in a manner that accorded with the culture that they were raised in, those actions caused me to suffer, not get proper help, and be alone for 8 years in silence. That's why I care so much. This cultural mentality, which is not unique to Asian culture alone, but to many other cultures as well, is so toxic and enabling the deaths of many. It is entirely preventable. According to the World Health Organization, over 800,000 people a year die from suicide. It's a tragedy that's occurring at this very moment, and a tragedy that's unfortunately affected the lives of the members of this Georgia Tech community. Countless people could be saved if there wasn't the societal stigma. You're not a freak if you have anxiety, depression, OCD, bipolar, or any other mental illness. You wouldn't belittle, judge, or shame someone for having cancer. So why do we do so for people that have mental illness when they're both simply just victims of something outside of their control? Why is it socially acceptable to take medication for an insulin imbalance in your blood, but not for a chemical imbalance in your brain? We should be trying to help those that are suffering, not kick them while they're down. I became so scared from that toxic stigma that I was unwilling to let anyone know how bad I was suffering until the point that I almost died. Many of my best friends had no idea that I was going through anything at all until they found my body on the floor that day. I've been so terrified that if I told my friends the truth, that they would hate me or think I was a freak. So terrified that until I thought for certain that I would die 30 minutes later, that I finally gained the courage to speak up because I wanted to tell them the reason why I wasn't going to be in their lives anymore. You shouldn't have to almost die to gain the courage to speak out. And if I could face death, I can face anything, even if that means sharing my biggest secret in front of the whole world. When someone's in their darkest pits of despair, sometimes someone else just showing that they care is all that's needed to be a shining light in their sea of darkness. The next time you see someone that you know and you think that something's slightly off, why not just check in and make sure that everything's okay? If you don't feel like you're qualified to handle the situation, guide them to a trusted friend or a professional and just show them that they know that they have your full support. Because I know when I was in that pit of despair, those few signs of care and concern I had were the few glimpses for a better tomorrow. I want to be the person for others that I didn't have at my worst. I want everyone here to be that person too. Thank you.